something I've always said was like, people talk a lot of crap about my generation. And then my response to that is, well, who raised this generation? If you're talking crap about who raised the generation,
yeah, bro.
It's like the coach that doesn't win a game in the season. You're talking crap about the players. Well, what about the coach?
What is up, guys? RLTKPHX, episode 24. Real Talk Phoenix. Glad to be in the building.
Yes, sir.
Got the guests coming through.
Special guest today.
Special guest today. And the reason is because
an OG.
Very close friend of ours.
Yep.
We consider him family. Even though there's a lot of things wrong with him, we still love him anyway.
Amen.
Yes. Shout out to my boy, Jesus.
Jesus Martinez.
His name's Jesus. He's probably salty right now because I just put his government name on blast.
He thinks
look
he's
at his
Jesus.
face. You see, look at his face.
Man.
Look at his face right now. He's like, bro, why you putting me on blast like that?
And I quote that guy who won the bowling tournament. Who are you? I am.
Shout out to my boy Alex.
Yes,
Welcome
sir.
on the show, bro. Glad to have you here.
Mm-hmm.
And so today we got another GenZer. So Alex is our regional director for Real Talk. So what that means is all the campus clubs that we have, he's responsible for overseeing those and making sure they run properly, making sure everybody has what they need in order to run them, making sure they get their conversation kits in order to be able to have the conversations with the teens on campus, making sure everybody gets their evals in. He does a bunch of stuff, and then he works with me in a bunch of other different capacities as well. He has to put up with me and John. So
he basically does everything Jordan doesn't want to do.
That's kind of disrespectful. So kudos to Alex for putting up with us. But anyways, he's a young dude, a GenZer, leading GenZers, and I think he's got an incredible, unique perspective to share with us today. And so anyways, Alex, thanks for being on once again.
Yeah.
And just to get us kicked off, man, we just want you to share with us your story. So what brings you up until this point, like to be here today?
Yeah, so first off, I'd like to clarify my name. My legal name is Jesus Alejandro Martinez, but everyone knows me by Alex.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to share, I guess, a little bit about my story. I am technically a first-generation Latino American.
Hey.
Parents were born in Mexico, but my dad grew up in L.A. Shout out to South Central LA, where he grew up in.
So that's like North Mexico, right?
Bro, you're disrespectful. You're so
well.
I
saw a T-shirt the other day. Like the whole MAGA thing. It said, "Make America Mexico again."
Yeah. I'm dead.
Well, yeah, that's a conversation.
Different conversation.
That's a different conversation for another day. That's
Make America Mexico again.
We gotta rewrite some of those history books, but hey, I'm not gonna talk about that today.
Yes, sir.
No, so my dad grew up in South Central LA, and he got to see the Rodney King riot.
Wow.
The whole.
Wow, so he grew up in the area when that was going on?
Yeah, one of my uncles was like rioting while it was happening.
Oh, wow.
Dang.
Funny story. My dad said that while the riots were happening, he showed up to the house with a truckload of stuff, and my uncle Alex is his name.
What a surprise.
He's actually,
Alex.
he's kind of like the off one in the family.
Okay.
But
really? Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, right. But he was like doing all that stuff, so he shows up with a truckload of stuff, and he's like arguing and fighting with my grandparents because my grandparents don't want it because it's stolen stuff.
Yeah.
And then he's like, screw you guys, whatever. And he grabbed a box of Twinkies and threw it at my dad because my dad loved Twinkies. What shocked me from the whole conversation was that, or the story that my dad told me was that my uncle, while he was rioting, had enough time to like remember that my dad loved Twinkies and get him a box of Twinkies. You know what I'm saying?
That's awesome.
Hold up, let me grab these Twinkies real quick.
It's pretty awesome.
But my boy.
I'm keeping the big screen TV.
But
you can have the
these
Twinkies.
But so my dad grew up in that like I think he went to Linwood High School, and he said that like Fridays, every like Friday or every other Friday after school, they'd let the students get out 15 minutes early, and there was SWAT teams, helicopters ready for gang fights. Like,
dang,
yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, crazy stuff like that. But luckily enough, my dad kind of was always a good kid for the most part. And then my mom
just grew up in a rough area.
Yeah, exactly. My mom grew up in Mexico in Ensenada, which is south of Tijuana, south of San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, my dad moved to Chula.
What's that area like where she came up from?
Ensenada. So so my mom grew up in a. Her story was a little different because her mom was the alcoholic in the family. So she experienced a lot of growing up at a younger age because of that. Because in Latino families, women are the ones that cook, clean.
Really?
Yeah. So males.
So that's a whole cultural thing there.
Yeah. So males kind of get off the hook a lot of the times. Like male boys even get off the hook. Like there's a lot of like people make fun of it. There's vines or whatever, but there's a lot of like, or even like Latina women who are upset and they tweet and they'll be like, Mexican moms, boys can do anything they want basically, but we have to stay home, cook and clean, right? So there's this kind of battle there, right? But
interesting.
But anyways, my dad moved when he got older. He moved to San Diego, Chula Vista, and Ensenada is like an hour and a half away from there. So we would just cross the border on the weekends and go hang out in Mexico all the time. And that's how I met my mom. And
interesting.
That's how they ended up having me. But my grandparents migrated to the United States when my dad was probably months or maybe a year or two old.
Okay.
And
what did they come over for?
Opportunity and work.
Okay.
They for a while they were pretty much homeless. My grandma would find people that would let her stay in the garage or kind of sleep in somewhere.
And what was she doing in the time here to make money and whatnot?
So my grandpa was the one that would try to go out and find anything when it came to work that he could get, whether it was a day job or till they could get stable and find a place. So, my grandpa.
So they just stayed wherever they could and just grind and went to work.
Pretty much. And then, my grandpa, from a very young age, he was a butcher from the age of like 12. So he's had a skill that's helped him, and he's just been pretty much a butcher for his whole life.
Wow.
And he came from a very abusive household with his dad. I remember him telling me stories that his dad would beat him so bad that he would urinate himself, and he said. I remember him telling me he said.
What was the reason for that?
I'm pretty sure just hate and alcohol and alcoholic dad. Growing.
He was telling you a story.
Yeah. So growing up, he said he was scared of his dad. He didn't understand why his dad would hit him so much. And it was as much as like his mom told him to take out the trash. He forgot to take out the trash, and that was like the end of the world for him. And he said he couldn't wait till he was old enough to beat up his dad, basically.
Oh dang.
And I think at the age of 12, my grandpa was bringing more money into his household than his own dad was. So my family comes from very hurt and humble beginnings. On grandma's side, they would, be lucky if they had like 2 meals in a day kind of thing.
How common would you say your story is for first generation Latinos who are here?
So I think
like their parents and grandparents had to go through a lot of similar things.
I think that the story hits home. I think the theme of it hits home a lot because alcohol has been very prevalent in my family, mostly. So you kind of have the alcoholic parent figure, and a lot of the times you have the mom, the woman, trying to do everything else besides work, right? So kind of the husband or the dad supposedly works, and then they come home and women are the ones that take care of the house and the home. So
the kids and whatnot.
The kids and stuff like that. So I think like right now in Mexico, there's a huge feminist movement going on because of women have just been taken advantage of a lot in a Latino context.
Really? So
yes.
There's a movement happening right now?
Yes, there's a movement. There's a huge...
is it called anything, or is it just...
I'm not really sure. I just saw that they had one of their first like big marches, and
Really?
I think I want to say it was in Guadalajara,
Wow.
Mexico. So there's a lot more advocating for equality, and I think a lot of that is needed for sure. But I think just like anything else, people go to extremes on both sides of things, and there's a lot of machismo.
What is that?
Yeah, so I think machismo is basically the way I've seen it is more so a very traditional view of the man is the man of the house, and no one can question him, disrespect him, whatnot.
So is that a word in Spanish? Like
Yeah, machismo. And ultimately, I know in a lot of those cases, it also means that kind of like, men can go out and cheat, and it's kind of not a big deal, right? But women, on the other hand, can't. So that's a little bit of kind of the history of my family. But so for me, first generation born here in Phoenix, and kind of I would say I've been very lucky to have family around me, grandparents, parents. Even though there's been a lot of dysfunction there, but my upbringing was pretty good for the most part. I don't ever remember having to struggle to eat, to go on vacations or anything like that. So yeah, there were tough times where money was tight and we were getting by week to week. But overall, I would say that I've been very blessed and privileged to live the life that I have now. I would say growing up, club sports were hard because club sports are expensive. So there was things that I was very limited that I could not do. But overall, my upbringing was pretty, I would say, good.
Would you say that you had that because your parents just worked so dang hard to make sure you had it?
Yeah. So I think I sometimes have to slow down and think about the things that my parents and my family has gone through to put things into perspective.
What do you mean by that?
So here, give you an example. So growing up, right, my parents would fight a lot, and I tend to be, my personality is more like my mom, where we're more passionate. We tend to be more argumentative. There's a lot of things that will kind of like my mom and I bump heads a lot. But it's a lot of it is because I've been an ungrateful kid, but also, we're passionate and our personalities are very alike. So my dad, on the other hand, is kind of the opposite of my mom, where he's been more passive and he doesn't want to argue and fight. He kind of like wants to have peace.
Just get along.
So growing up, my parents would argue a lot, just like any other relationship, right? I know it's taboo for a lot of people that don't like to talk. Oh, my parents don't fight. No, my parents used to fight a lot. Yeah, it was arguing and cussing, and I didn't, I don't hold that against them because they're human beings, and
for sure.
So they would argue and fight a lot, but my mom would kind of fight sometimes for my sister and me about stuff. And I would kind of, because my mom was almost seemed like the aggressor, right? I almost kind of viewed her as being the bad one, right? It's like when you're watching a boxing match, you see the person who's attacking as the bad guy, right? Yeah. And the person who's defending,
you feel sorry.
You feel sorry for them. So I felt kind of growing up, that's kind of what I saw. My dad kind of wanted peace and didn't want to argue, and my mom did. So growing up, instead of seeing my mom as an advocate for me, I saw her as someone who was the bad person, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Wow.
But ultimately, I put into perspective, wow, my mom, when I was conceived in Mexico, but my mom was born in the U.S., right? Yeah. So my mom, because my dad and her were in a relationship, right? They ended up getting together, and they ended up, starting a family, and they came to Phoenix, and so my mom was away from her family, having me. Her dad had just passed away, and she didn't have any community here besides my dad's parents, which how family relationships go, right?
Yes.
Those aren't always the best.
Yeah, no doubt.
So
It's crazy.
And then just seeing how much of a hard worker my mom is and all this and that, like sometimes I have to like slow down and just like appreciate and think through how much she's been through and how much she's worked hard for me.
It makes you think like if the roles were reversed, could you have went
Yes.
through what she went through?
Exactly. Yeah.
Dang.
And I don't even know if I could.
No, real talk. Man.
Anyways, so luckily enough, I've had a pretty good upbringing, and but just like
but there's a lot there, man.
But just like just like anyone else, and I remember I heard last Saturday I heard Jeff Skeen say, living is traumatizing, right? The human experience is traumatizing, and I think for a while sometimes I think to myself like, okay, like I didn't have any like major trauma. I didn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't raped. I wasn't physically beaten. And sometimes I think like, man, why did I do all the things that I did in my life? But ultimately, there's every little thing about my life, whether it was my parents fighting or whatever, traumatized me in my own way.
Yeah.
So obviously I never processed through my anger. I never processed through my emotional state and all this and that. Luckily enough, though, my grandma, Luz is her name, who is in heaven now, praise God. She was very close. Her and I had the best relationship ever, and I always had her to kind of fall back on. And she was a Christian, and it always upset me sometimes because I just have a conversation with her, and she would always come back, bring God into it, and I'm just like, all right, Grandma. Anyways, so
God had nothing to do with last night, right, Grandma?
So growing up, I actually got to live a year in Mexico in Guadalajara with her.
Oh, wow.
And it was a beautiful, amazing experience. And,
really? What was so beautiful about it?
I think the beautiful thing about living in Mexico, in Guadalajara at least, was I lived a normal life in Mexico, maybe a little bit better than most people.
Really?
But I wasn't rich. I didn't have like, just money to spend because my parents would send me money from America or anything like that. I wasn't like, preppy because I had more than everyone else. Like I lived with my grandma at her house. She, anyone can have a business in Mexico pretty much. You just set up and, you fix your, a lot of people fix their living rooms as the little restaurants and they just serve out of their house basically.
Wow.
So she had fixed the whole, downstairs was like a clothing store. And she would just come over here, buy things at Savers or Goodwill or go yard sailing and then flip it for a lot more money over there, right? So I got to live with her and I rode public transportation to school. I played soccer over there. I had public transportation it's just buses go everywhere. And if not, there's hundreds and thousands of taxis everywhere because it's a big city. So I just lived a normal life. I wasn't focused on trying to impress anyone with what I had or try to have this next thing or that next thing. It was a day-to-day life. Like you had like the little mini mart that was, a block down the street.
So it was like pace of life stuff.
It's pace of life. You have the mini mart. You're like, okay, what am I feeling that I want to eat today? You just want like a steak. So you buy one steak. You buy a little piece of butter and a soda can and you bring it back to your house and that's what you eat, so you don't have to worry about, going to Walmart on the weekends and buying hundreds of dollars worth of food for the whole week, right? So pace of life was beautiful. Weather was beautiful. And there's always people outside. People are outside. Community, right? People in the evenings just sit outside their house and drink or drink coffee or
love that about
have their
Latino
dinner.
Culture, bro. Every time I drive through my neighborhood, all the garage doors that are open and all the people that are just chilling outside, their whole families, drinking beer, watching sports, having conversation, playing games. I'm just like, dang, I want to be Latino because I want to hang out.
I feel
like that way.
Yeah.
And there's so many beautiful things about the Latino culture, I think. And I think in where we're at in society right now and the things that have been happening, and I think obviously with everything else that's going on right now, it's kind of not really being focused on, even though, we are in that time where we're talking about the election again and all those different types of things. One of the things we were hearing before is obviously a lot of stuff on immigration and different things of that nature. I think we miss like how beautiful the cultures and the different people from different backgrounds and different ethnicities that exist in the United States.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And one of those in particular, obviously, that we're speaking on today is Latino culture. And I think so many people just miss out on how beautiful Latino culture is, man. And they hear about all the bad stuff or all the things that might be happening, right? All the stories from the grapevine.
Yeah.
And they brush every single person who has that hue of skin with that story. Yeah. And so it just makes me sad, man, because obviously I hear, like most people's lives, pain, but then a lot of beauty as well. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so obviously I know you came back to America, right? And so as you came back, acclimatized again to American culture and then kind of grew up in it, like what was that like? What did you see? And then I guess to transition the conversation a little bit as well once you get done with that, like you're actually a Gen Zer, you grew up as a Gen Zer, so what are some of the things that you're seeing amongst your generation that are important for us to know? And then like with your unique perspective as a Latino with the things that you've experienced and the things that you're seeing.
So I came back my freshman year and
like, did you notice quickly when you came back, like, whoa, America again?
Yeah, I think obviously America was home for most of my life, so it was kind of like, I went, for a year and then came back, so it wasn't like a big deal.
Gotcha.
Things were still the same, for the most part. Things were still the same, and it was fun and everything, and basically, like, I came into high school and back to my kind of bit of dysfunctional household and started hanging out with my friends again. And, I think it's very just easy to get caught up in what everyone else is doing. So I just basically started to get high, smoke weed with my friends. And
how old were you at this time?
That was my freshman year of high school. So I was
15,
I think.
Okay.
And the same thing also started to get as much.
About 7 or 8 years ago?
Yeah, I'm 22 now, so
Okay.
7 years ago. So
it's not that long ago.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah, not that long ago actually. And also, just started to have as much attention as I could from the ladies.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
Living that lifestyle too. You and I both know I'm not ugly.
See that right there?
Hey,
went fishing, caught myself and Alex.
Y'all are both prettier than I am, so I'll just say that.
That's definitely true.
So just started doing that, and then by the time I was like a senior in high school, like I started messing around with painkillers, and ultimately, kind of lost myself for a little bit. I wouldn't say. I think for me, it was more the self gratification from the ladies than anything else. Gotcha. Everything else seemed like it was more for fun, and I think I ultimately kind of what took me out of that was I had just had a really bad experience. Kind of like I said earlier, my grandma talked to me about God all the time.
You had a really bad experience with drugs?
Yeah. Okay. So I had a really bad experience with drugs where I had smoked wax with some of my friends.
Explain what that is for people who may not know.
It's basically it's like concentrated THC.
Okay.
It's just a simple way of explaining it. Basically I got like high, like super high.
Right.
Like
high squared.
Like I felt what it was like to be Snoop Dogg or something.
I'm the highest in the room. Hey, that was you.
Is that supposed to be Travis Scott?
Yeah, I think so. That was my attempt. Hey.
Okay.
It was my attempt.
So
shout out Travis Scott.
So I had this crazy experience. So I can wrap up so I can get to the next point. But I felt like I was super high. I felt like...
Was it just freaking you out or what?
It was freaking me out. Like I felt like I had summoned a demon or a devil into a room, and like it's crazy because it's so surreal that it's hard to explain sometimes because I feel like people don't understand what I'm talking about and they think I'm crazy. Oh, you were just tripping high. Like, no, I was not tripping. Well, I was tripping, but like there was something spiritual. There was something more to it. The heaviness in the room, right? I felt like, when good examples like when you're watching, if you ever watch Tom and Jerry, or if you ever watched it, when Tom would like go up the stairs to heaven, and because he was being mean to the mouse, to Jerry,
Yeah.
the devil would like pull him in, and then he'd put him into the boiling pit, and he'd be
Right.
trying to get out, and he couldn't get out. Right? That's exactly how it felt. But
Dang,
I felt like I felt like
That's the sense that you had.
there was going to be a hole in the ground, and like I was going to get pulled in and go to hell. And I was having like I couldn't breathe. I felt like everything inside me was like closing in, and the experience was like crazy. And then I at a moment felt God talking to me like, "Why are you doing this?" I'm like, "I don't know." And I just started praying.
Humanity.
Really?
Started praying, and at one point it felt like I was taken out of my body, and I was watching myself from a third person perspective.
Really?
And I was staring down at myself, and I couldn't move in the moment, so I was just stuck. And it was almost like there was this war battle had been going on my whole life that I never saw until this moment. And I saw like this like fire coming at my body, and like I'm just stuck there, can't do anything. And I just saw someone on a horse riding up in the middle of it and just like blocking it all. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this God dude is real. And
wow. So that was the vision that you had?
Yeah, so that was, I would say that was kind of my turning point. I'd say a year later, I turned to Jesus with my faith and my trust. And ever since then, that's kind of how I met Jordan, actually, and because he was having those conversations with me.
Where were you guys having conversation at?
I got invited to a college group church, and he had met the pastor at his school because he's a teacher.
Gotcha.
And we hit it off because of soccer, and we just started having conversations, and eventually, we started hanging out more, and he brought me in to help him do Real Talk a little bit at some high schools. And at first, it was a volunteer experience. It was an experience to just share my story with other students. And then before you know it, I'm all wrapped up in this and I can't get out. But
I'm trapped.
You definitely can't get out.
But
that horseman was Jordan. I saved you. How quickly the tables have turned.
Whoa. That's definitely not what happened.
Yeah, you've never ridden a horse a day in your life, have you?
Nah, bro, I'd fall over.
Can you see
bust.
Jordan on a horse?
No.
Yeah, I could see.
Bro.
I can see it in your face. You're going to say something out
we got to keep
Don't
this
do it.
PG for our audience.
He's more than GenZers, bro. He was going to say something out of line.
Meme culture right here, ladies and gents.
Yeah, so one thing about GenZers, specifically about me, which is worse. I think I'm worse than most GenZers. My mind sometimes when I think about a situation goes to the worst possible case scenario, but at the same time something that's like kind of funny related, which doesn't make sense to a lot of people.
You're morbid.
It's easier to laugh than it is to cry, you know?
Yes. So I started hanging out, and now I oversee the campuses and do that. So could you just remind me the question that you had for me regarding the GenZers?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what is it like being a GenZer that serves GenZers? So you're a GenZer yourself.
Yes.
And so that experience, like what are some of the things that you've seen about your generation? But then as a GenZer, what are some of the things you're seeing about GenZers that you serve? Because it was an experience you had as you grew up in high school.
Yes.
And you learned stuff about your people. Mm-hmm. But then you're serving them now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what are you learning there? So I guess it's kind of two-pronged.
So interesting thing about that question is I think the way that technology has increased within the last 10 years, like I have a younger sibling and she's a freshman in high school. So her experience in high school is even different than mine, even though we're the same generation, I think. It's interesting because I notice students want to be heard for what they have to say. Students want to be, but they also want to listen, believe it or not. Like I know sometimes people are like, those young kids don't want to listen and all that. Well, the young kids don't want to listen because you're telling them what to do, and you don't realize that you're doing this, but you're also being very rude and condescending when you say it, so they're not going to listen.
Or just matter of fact, right?
Yes.
That's one of the things I've noticed from GenZers. I was at an event one time speaking, and I was sharing some stuff, and being honest, it was kind of like some cliche stuff that I was saying. And I'd noticed this one girl in there, and we were in the conversational dynamic, right? And I said, did you have something you want to say? She's like, I just feel like everything you're saying is like super cliche. And it hit me.
Dang.
And I was like, well, what do you mean? She's like, I just have heard this over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, it's like, at what point do we get into the nitty gritty with what's really going on in our lives personally?
Yeah.
And it just really hit me. And I had to be honest. I said, I apologize. I said, to be honest, there's a lot of things that I've learned growing up, and I've just passed those along. And what was crazy about it, the fact that I apologized to her, and then I tried to explain why I was giving the answer seemed to go a long way. But you're right, man. I think, growing up with a cell phone in your hand, you can fact check every word that comes out of the mouth of your leaders.
Yeah.
And if they're saying some nonsense or some cliche stuff, I feel like you guys are going to just let them know. Like, stop giving me that whack stuff.
Well, I think that's a good point,
I
right?
mean, am I wrong, or is that
you
just
are
me?
100% right. So one, GenZers can smell BS 1,000 miles away, right? Like if you're saying something, as you're saying it, they're on their phone researching it, and they're going to see if it's true or not, right? And they can also tell if you're authentic or not.
Right.
And I think one of the important things that people need to understand is that as adults, as people who are influencing Gen Z, or even other Gen Zers influencing Gen Z, a good thing that I think is positive is to out yourself. Out yourself. Just be honest about who you are and what you do. Like, there's no Gen Zers are the most accepting, people.
That's
and
a good point, bro.
like of whatever you want to do. So you should just out yourself and
What do you mean,
explain
out
to
yourself?
Well, be
Like,
honest about your
failures.
Your failures, like, hey, I'm teaching you this way because this is how I was taught. Like you're saying, you were explaining to her why you were saying these things, and she was like, oh wow, like I understand, right?
Yeah, because she was tempted to think that I was giving her that answer because I didn't care about her. And what I said was like, look, you're right. And like, dang, thank you for sharing that with me. I really need to think through how to communicate that.
That's good, bro.
But she was calling me out.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like with Gen Zers. They will call you out. They're not just going to sit there in your group and listen, and they're going to
Here's the
speak
thing
up.
that I think too that is sad when a Gen Z gets to a point where they don't call you out.
Oh, that's true.
You know what I'm saying?
That's where memes come
They've
from.
given up.
Yeah.
You become a meme.
Because it's true, bro. Okay, Karen.
Exactly. Okay, boomer.
Yeah. Because what happens is, and I think a lot of them experience this with their parents, and you can kind of, I guess, speak to this as well, especially with yourself and then what you're seeing with your sister and what you're seeing on campus, is that they get to a point where they understand fundamentally that the person they're talking to is not hearing what they have to say.
Correct.
And so they're just not going to waste their time saying it anymore.
Yep.
And they're just going to act like they're being obedient and are listening to everything you have to say, and they're going to nod their head and do this. And they're not taking in anything.
Yeah.
And they don't care about anything you have to say. And then they're going to go and do the exact opposite of what you said.
And then get reinforcement for the opposite thing that they did online.
It's true.
And
that's the scary part about the internet.
it
right?
doesn't really take
You can
courage
find
to be
affirmation for
rebellious
anything.
anymore. It doesn't take courage to be rebellious anymore.
So, interesting point you said.
You know what I'm saying?
That Gen Zers won't come to your event, whatever you're putting on, right? So, I remember having a conversation with a high schooler, and he was explaining to me, because I took him out to lunch, and he was a very bright kid, and I was explaining to him, I asked him, I was like, so I remember you told me you go to church, like, do you still go to church, or why don't you go to church? He's like, oh, I still go to church. He's like, I don't go to youth group anymore, to youth service. And I was like, why don't you go to youth service? Like, that's, I guess I'm putting myself in the position of, like, going with your friends and all this and that. And he's like, I don't go to youth service because every time I go, I feel like they treat me like an idiot. And they're not, like, telling me, they're like the stuff they're teaching me, like, I already know, like, give me something deeper.
Babying.
So he was saying, he's like, I'll go sit in main service with my mom, and, I enjoy that a little bit better. But, I think...
so you don't think that guy was just an anomaly? You think that's true of most of Gen Z?
I think it is true of most Gen Z, right? And I think
They want deeper stuff?
I think the reason about the whole deeper stuff is that I think a lot, in not just churches, but I'm saying a lot of places create fake love environments.
What do you mean?
Well, it's this idea that if you pour out to others and like leadership's a big topic right now, right? Everyone wants it, like Gen Zers want to be entrepreneurs, and leadership's a big topic. So you have to listen to podcasts, read books, like up your leadership game, right? So a lot of places, in general have this idea of servant leadership, right? Like servant leadership, serve others, right? That's what it means to be a leader.
Right.
But most of those people who are serving others aren't being served to. So the people that are telling them to serve others are their leaders, whether it's work, school.
But who's serving them?
But no one's serving them.
Wow.
And that's why we have such an issue with this, because this serves us. This gives us gratification, right? I can go on YouTube
Comfort.
and I can and some of it's positive, right? Like I can go on YouTube and find a video of, hey, you know, self-worth for men, right? Or like I can find something that's gonna feed me and encourage me, right? Like sometimes I'm sitting here and I'm just like, you know, I'm spending so much time on my phone, wasting time. Like I need to look at something that's gonna give me research or something that's gonna help me grow as a person, right?
Yeah, it's good.
But ultimately, that is how the things work a lot of times with these students, is that they're not being poured into and they're not really being loved, right? It's like someone comes up to you, you know, they tell you they love you, but do they really love you?
And you're sensing this. It's interesting you say this, because one of our recent guests was talking about the reason they stopped playing sports was they felt like the team was a fake love environment. Kind of what you said. And what they meant was, oh, I'm a part of this team until I'm injured.
Or until I'm not a part.
Until I'm not a part.
Until I'm not on the roster anymore. And then you guys don't care about me.
And it's the same way with youth groups, right? Like, oh, you're in our youth group. You're part of our thing. I love you so much. Until you stop going, right? Or until you don't do the thing.
GenZ definitely sees through that. Like, I've noticed that. Like, there's so many times where I've been on campus with kids, and they're just looking at you like, how long is it going to be before you leave?
Right.
How long is it going to be before you try and sell me your thing, or try and get me to come to your thing, or buy this thing, or do this thing, or do that thing? The only reason you're in my life is because you're trying to get me to go in the direction that you think I should go.
Yeah. And as influencers on social media, they understand that.
Fundamentally.
So if you're a leader and that comes across that you're just trying to build your numbers, you're trying to build your thing.
Yeah, they don't care. They won't follow you. They won't pay attention to your stuff. We have to get into this space where we are, like you said, out in ourselves, right? We're authentic, we're real, we're open, we're honest. And we essentially can say, I don't know either. Yeah. I don't have it all figured out either.
Yeah.
I don't have all the answers either. But what I want to do is journey with you, and what I want to do is give you what I do know. And maybe along the way, you can give me some stuff that you know. Because I don't know, I feel like one of the most important things that I've learned spending time on campus with GenZers is that I can learn from them.
Yes.
That the exercise of me going on campus and spending time with GenZers is not about them. It's about me.
Yeah, that's good, man.
I need to hear from them. I need to hear what they have to say. I need to learn. I need to grow. I need to understand. And so when I go on campus, I genuinely want to know what's up. I genuinely want to know their perspective. I genuinely want to know how they view stuff. I genuinely want to hear what they have to say. And I think they feel that. And they're like, oh, this guy actually really cares about what I have to say. And then they really tell me. And I really listen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Instead of, let you talk so I can tell you what it is that I really want to tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
so you feel like you had a turn.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's where discovery guidance really comes in hand, right? I remember when I used to coach soccer, one of the techniques I learned was, you know, I was coaching little kids that are learning the skill of soccer, the beautiful game, the best sport in the world.
Let them know.
But I was teaching them how to pass the ball, right?
Okay.
Now, if you have ever sat on a sideline during a little kid soccer match, parents are screaming everything that they can at them. Kick, pass, right? And at the end of the day, the kid has no idea what's going on besides he wants to play soccer and score, right? So the thing that they taught us is, okay, you give them the opportunity, you give them opportunities. You say, you put two of them with the ball that are going to score, and then one defends, right? So he has two chances. He can try to score himself, or he can pass to his friend, right, who's next to him. When he does one of them, the next time you're talking to him, you're like, oh, hey, so what are your options here, right? You ask him, what are your options? What can you do? And then he's like, well, I can pass the ball to Timmy over here. And then he himself is like, oh, I can do that. Cool. So then they themselves start to learn, right? And I think that's the same thing for, I mean, the way that GenZers want to learn, right? You want to be able to give them the options. You don't want to, like, tell them what to do, but you want to be like, hey, man, you know, kind of like how you're saying, right, with the experience and the bad decision that we made in our life, we could be like, hey, I made this decision and this is what happened, right? So these are kind of the consequences and kind of explaining to them like the different decisions that they can make in their lives.
That's good, bro.
And then they're the ones that are going to be able to own whatever decision that they make. Because if you tell them what decision to make and the decision you told them to make was a wrong one, whose fault is it?
Wow.
Right? They're going to blame you for it.
That's good.
And here's what we ultimately have to do. We have to trust that Gen Z isn't stupid.
Right.
The reason why we tell people what to do is because we think that they're going to make the wrong decision if we don't tell them what to do.
Right.
But what if we just presented these kids with the information that they needed and they actually end up making good decisions?
How long you been making wrong decisions?
Your whole life? You know
like as though you've ever made the best decision.
What's your favorite quote, Jordan?
John C. Maxwell. You've been messing stuff up for long enough now. Let somebody else mess it up for a while.
It's so good,
it's
man.
True. And so it's like we got to give opportunity. It makes me think of like literally just this week. I was having a conversation with a bunch of teenagers, and one of them, who I've had the privilege of having some major influence on, she was talking about how she was struggling with some things concerning her identity and who she wanted to be and how she wanted to define herself. And so me and her had a conversation. And I'd laid out for her like all these, like she was talking about her identity, and I was like, "Is this working for you?" She was like, "No," and I was like, "Okay, so maybe you should try something else." And so I presented her with options, right? Like, "Hey, here's what I put my identity in, right? I'm a Christian, so I put my identity in Christ. Do you want that? If you do, then try it. If you don't, then what are you going to put your identity in?" So she went away. And she thought about that for a solid week. And then she realized, like, yo, he's right. I'm trying to put myself in all this other stuff. I need to put myself here in this. And when she did that, her life is starting to make way more sense. And she's starting to figure things out. And she's way more comfortable in who she is.
Wow, that's
and
great.
how she identifies herself. But what she realized is, like, I'm way more than this one thing that I'm identifying myself as right now. I'm a girl. I'm a musician. I'm an artist. I'm this, I'm that. And, like, I'm just trying to identify myself by this one thing. Like, I'm all these things, right?
That's so good, man.
And so, but I didn't tell her what to do.
She arrived at that conclusion.
Exactly. I didn't force her. I didn't force her to believe what I believed. I didn't say, hey, if you don't believe this, I'm going to hate you.
Yeah.
I just said, hey, here's my life. Here's what I figured out. This is what it looks like you're doing to me. What I would do if I was you is make a decision. And if you want to talk about it more, let me know. And she went and wrestled with it.
Yeah.
She didn't even tell me. And now, as a consequence, like, her life and the things she's doing and the way she's behaving and the things she's engaging in are completely different.
That's so good.
And obviously, I wanted to see that happen. But what I fundamentally understood is that I couldn't make it happen.
Yeah.
I had to give her the ability to say yes or to say no.
Yeah. What's incredible
and I think that's
about
what we're afraid of, right?
You as an influencer had that conversation with her, right? And she goes back a week and
I never.
She's arrived at
this conversation was like
how
over
is it
a
that
year ago.
parents are not having these conversations?
Well, because once again, I think
you get what I'm saying.
I think parents, I think teachers, I think coaches. What we got to be cognizant of is that we don't find our own sense of self-worth, enoughness, righteousness, if you will, in the decisions that teenagers we have influence over or teenagers that we're responsible for parenting make.
Like, we want to take credit for
how
they turn out.
Well, exactly. So if they turn out bad, it makes you bad.
They turn out good, it makes me good.
Exactly.
That's why I'm pressuring
So that's
them.
why we're so concerned with behavior.
Wow.
Don't do this, do this. Because if you appear to be the right type of thing, then everybody can say, look at me.
Yeah.
I was the good parent. I was the good coach. I was the good teacher. I helped them figure it out. I made them what they are. And the reason they are the way they are is because they spend time with me.
So the kids realize it has nothing to do with them.
I'm great and awesome. Well, it's not even about the kids. It's about the social space that they live in. And so they want the people in their social space to look at them a particular way. And so if I can influence these people that I'm responsible for leading and they turn out a certain way, it means I'm a good leader.
Dang, bro.
And so it's not about if I see transformation in this person's life and actually help them figure out what it means to be human. It's just about if I can get them to behave a particular way and do things that would communicate to everybody around us that they've got it figured out, which means I have it figured out.
And then I can take credit.
Exactly. You don't have to because people will give you the credit.
You know what's crazy about that?
Dude.
so many parents are so many parents are scared of sending their kids to therapy or counseling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they feel like they're going to be labeled a certain way. But the funny thing about that is those parents are the ones that probably need therapy more than the actual student does. Or
Dang,
right?
it's a good point.
From what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
Because if your identity is on, wow, people are going to think about me a certain way because, my kid needs to go figure out his own issues because I'm a broken human being too, right?
Newsflash: every parent is going to screw up their child. Point blank.
Something I've always said was like, people talk a lot of crap about my generation, and then my response to that is, well, who raised this generation? If you're talking crap about who raised the generation,
yeah, bro,
it's like the coach that doesn't win a game in the season. You're talking crap about the players. Well, what about the coach?
Right.
The responsibility falls on the coach because the coach is the one that gets fired, not the players.
And I think that's where OK Boomer comes from. The kids understand it more than the coaches do. You see what I'm saying? And that's the weird world that we're raised up in right now, is that the young people seem to have a better understanding about what's going on than most of the older people around.
The scary thing about that is that because, it's good that people are taking care of themselves, but because people are taking care of themselves, people that are older who have a great role in society. And I think that there's a lot of people who are older who have a lot to offer, but at the same time, there should also be people who are younger stepping into, some of those leadership roles. And
they won't get out of the way.
Exactly.
That's the problem. They need to have this sense of whatever authority.
Because they've attached their sense of identity to it.
Wow.
And so we have to be cognizant as we come up as the next generation to not do that, to recognize that apart from our roles in society, we're husbands, we're fathers, we're wives and mothers and sisters and brothers and friends, right? We have to recognize those relational aspects of who we are and lean into those as opposed to leaning into our position in the society that is attached to a certain pay packet, right? And responsibility in the larger grand scheme of society, right? And so we've placed all of our identity there, and we get no sense of self from, our relationships. And it's actually backwards. We should be getting our sense of self from our community and who we dwell with, and the kids, our kids, and
do we dwell with anyone when we're on our phones in a room full of people?
It's a great question.
To truly dwell with someone, you got to be engaged with them.
It's true.
You know what I'm saying? So there is some critique to, hey, technology could be a culprit here too. You know what I'm saying? I think so.
And it's a tool, right? It's neutral. It's not good or bad. It's how we're using it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of the problem.
But we turn to that because I think in many ways, younger people have turned to technology because it's there for them. It doesn't say no.
That's good, bro.
It doesn't say no.
Wow.
Now the danger is it'll lead you down perdition as well as it'll lead you down
righteous. It doesn't say no when it should say no.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Man. All right. So Alex, as we kind of get ready to wrap this thing up, I think an important question to be asked. You as a Gen Zer, if you could tell people that are influencers some helpful things that could be done for Gen Zers, and I'm specifically thinking so as you were a teenager, what did you need from adults in your life that would have helped your life look a little bit different than what it did? And thank God that it changed for the better, right? But there are so many young people like you where that doesn't happen, right? And they don't end up getting those influences in their life. Or they don't get them when they need them, and they end up in prison, dead, or making decisions that forever change their lives to have kids, all different types of things that happen. And so what do you wish you had from influencers? What would you want influencers to know about you growing up that would have helped you walk a different path much sooner?
Yeah. So I think the first one, which is the hardest one to understand because we don't understand it, is technology, right? So once the internet came out and I'm in junior high school, right? Wasn't blocked on anything, so I could have access to anything from porn to I could look up a video of someone getting decapitated if I wanted to, right? So that is a lot to take in for any one period.
Yes.
Especially for someone who's in junior high or elementary school now. Like, let's be real, right? But understanding that the person that you are raising, in regards of whatever that is, will be a part of history, like in a way that no one ever else has been. Will be a part of history in the sense of everything that they do will be documented.
Yes.
So
dang, that's true. That's crazy.
Will have
think about
That's
that.
never happened to any
I'll
other
have my
generation
own
before.
history documentary when I'm 60, and everyone can look through my whole life and pick apart what they like, what they don't like, what I tweeted.
Well, even your search history.
Search history,
There's
everything.
no such thing as your history being deleted. You need to hear that. Metadata keeps all of that. Every picture, every email, every text message, every conversation,
be
every
found.
voicemail. It's there on the internet right now forever.
Exactly.
That is a profound point.
So
Dang.
that in and of itself.
Maybe that's where that sense of guilt that Gen Z carries on them comes from.
So that's one of those things though that like if you're not having conversations about technology, and when I mean conversations, I don't mean, hey, we're gonna like have that whatever app parents have that like tracks how fast their kids go, track everything they search. Like, okay, cool. Like you're like putting a muzzle on it, and then before you know it, they're gonna not deal with those issues because you just stop them.
They're just gonna find a way around it.
And they're gonna find a way around it, or they're just gonna go indulge themselves in it because they didn't know how to grasp it. They didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know what conversations they could have, and ultimately they're not going to trust you with it because you have their phones blocked. You know, like you have their phones blocked. You don't even know if they would go and look up that stuff, but you assume they will. That's another thing, right? I think one of the most things that upsets me the most is when people assume things.
Yeah.
When older generations have told me, "Hey, don't do this," and I'm just like, no, like I was never going to do that in the first place, so don't tell me not to do it. And that's where my attitude comes out. Like, you know, like I was never going to do it in the first place, so don't assume that I was going to do it.
Yeah.
Or I've never done that before, so why are you even saying it?
Yeah. You just assume you're some basic person like everyone else who can't control
Yeah,
themselves.
I think so. Interestingly enough, I heard this yesterday from a GenZer who's in high school right now. They said parents should focus more on our positive instead of our negatives, right? Like we were talking earlier about this pressure that Gen Zers have of having to perform because their parents, whatever. Like I remember working with kids that were in high school who had straight A's, athletes, all this and that, and they like I'd say, hey, you know what? Like I really appreciated your help today. You did a good job, and just the look on their face, like telling them that they did a good job, like broke me because I realized. Wow, like they don't get this from their parents because they're still not good enough, even though they're doing everything they possibly can. So I think a lot of the times parents need to focus a lot on the positive of their kids. Yeah, okay, you know, your kid has an issue with talking back, or maybe he's started vaping or started smoking weed, right? Which I'm not saying are good things, but like instead of focusing so much on their negatives, also focus on their positives because maybe if you focus on their positives and love them for those positives, they won't do those bad things, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think for me growing up, a lot of it also was parents not, and we're all hypocrites, I understand that, but kind of like how I was saying, out yourself a little bit, like be honest about your brokenness and the things that you've done. Don't just say no, 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 or whatever, right? Like have conversations with your kids about this stuff. And again, right, like I love my parents. I don't hold things against them anymore. But no one had conversations with me about porn. I don't remember. No one had these conversations about these things, right? And then they come out, and then it's just like full on shame, and there's nothing that you could really do about it, right?
That's such a
There's
great
just,
point, man.
people kind of like how I was saying earlier, they just focus on the negative of that, and then you're kind of just stuck being shameful and not realizing, oh, maybe my dad went through this, right? Or maybe my mom went through this, right?
Yeah.
Like it's sad that it's normal, but it's something that human beings go through, and ultimately, on that sense, right? Like. Some issue, you know, every society, every generations has its own issues, and as much as of a help internet has been, it's also hurt us a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like I've no kids who have an addiction to watching. I don't know what it's called, but they have an addiction to watching like people getting like decapitated and stuff like that, gory stuff.
Yeah.
And like those are like things that will be more real to us, right? The same thing with pornography. Fight the New Drugs, bringing out a lot of stuff when it comes to that. But
FTND on Twitter, social media.
But those are things that probably will be more prevalent in our society because it's easier to access, right? Yeah. And what parents need to influence you to understand is that when students talk about these things, or we can't handle things as a taboo. Like I remember,
so good.
I've had conversations.
It's normal, right?
That's worth repeating. Because that's a nugget for influencers.
I've had conversations with people who I would say are probably millennials or Gen Xers. You talk about God. Oh, we don't talk about this, or you don't talk about like homosexuality.
He talks about everything.
Yeah, people are like, I've had conversations around older people feel uncomfortable talking about some of this stuff.
Yeah,
I just don't want to deal with it, and I think a lot of that comes from their own issues and their own baggage.
Because they don't want to fight. Because the only way they know how to have a conversation is to fight. Not to be able to – they don't think, well, I can learn from them. I have to impose my idea, right? And so when you have – I tell people this all the time. Conversations are better than conflict. It's not a zero-sum game here. We can both learn together. And I think Gen Z especially really understands that. Like maybe the social media thing has helped on that. Like we can understand and come to a mutual understanding together. We don't always have to – be in conflict.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think another thing is kind of affirm and don't judge. So when I mean affirm someone's feelings, affirm that those feelings are real, and affirm that they have a right to feel however they feel because they are humans, right? We need to affirm how people feel about things. That doesn't mean that you have to agree with it, but that also means that you don't have to judge it. So you can just let people be vulnerable and honest with you about things and not freak out about it and be able to like, just like, okay, cool, yeah, for sure. Why do you and then just ask questions. And then
so good, man.
Play the long game. So it's funny because it's so real. I remember watching Shrek when he's walking with a donkey to go to Lord Farquaad's castle, right? Before they have the epic battle scene.
That was such an epic movie, bro.
That was. Shrek is amazing.
So many secret little funny things in there.
But no, the meaning behind Shrek, really, when you think about it. So he was walking with him and he's eating an onion, and he's telling Donkey that ogres are like onions because they have different layers, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with human beings, right? We have different layers of our brokenness, and what at one point might be anger, when you unpeel your anger, it's insecurity, right? When you unpeel your insecurity, it's the love that your parents never gave you. Rejection, right? Yeah. So and it's not that easy.
No.
It's super complex, sure. Right? But we all have our own onion in a sense, and it's not about like cutting it open and unpeeling it because then your eyes start to cry and
right.
And that, right? But it's about the process, right? It's about the process more
the long game
more than it is the destination, right? Because we will never arrive till we arrive.
That's so good, man.
And those are things that we need to take into consideration when having these conversations. Is always play the long game. And just like parents are working out their issues, grandparents are working out their issues, and we all need to understand that it takes a lifetime to change, not a counseling session or a year of whatever.
Yeah, or some emotional moment at a youth camp.
Exactly.
That's good, bro.
Dang.
That's really good. All right.
Good
Episode
stuff, man.
24.
Yep.
In the books.
Kobe.
Hey.
R.I.P. Kobe. Yeah, real rap.
I'm still feeling a kind of way about that.
Really?
So, yeah.
Dang.
I saw this thing that came out recently where it showed, I guess it was that 30 for 30, and they showed a little bit of him in it, and it got me kind of emotional.
Michael Jordan's 30 for 30.
Please.
Do it now. Stop playing.
Yeah.
All right. Episode 24 in the books.
Yes,
Alex,
sir.
Thank you. Very helpful. Brought a lot of perspective for us. Super appreciate you. Appreciate your leadership. Appreciate you being part of this team. Thank you. You guys are going to be getting to know Alex a ton, obviously, because he's a part of the squad, so you're going to be seeing his face more. Remember, this is the end, or not the end, but the beginning of the conversation. So what we want you to do is to continue it, comment, like, share, whatever you do. If it's helpful, give it to somebody. If you want to continue to dialogue with us, we're more than open to doing that. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, RLTKPHX. We love you guys. We will talk to you soon. Peace.
Peace out.